Danielle here from the Teaching Entrepreneur Association, and I'd like to welcome you to this video, which today is all about teaching methods. So what I thought we would do is we'll first of all look at what teaching methods actually are. Then we'll talk through about 10 different teaching methods. There are loads of them, but I thought I would go through roughly about 10, the most popular, some perhaps not so popular, but 10 of them anyway. And then we'll go and look in depth at 4 others. So let's start with what teaching methods actually are. So teaching methods are the approach that you use, or the approaches that you use to teaching, to actually getting your message over to your students. And hopefully you use several of them during a class and you don't just stick to one. So I've got a list of these teaching methods, so forgive me if I look away for a little while just so that I've got all of them. So the first one is lecturing. So we talk about lecturing, standing up and spouting forth, as it. There's another one, discussion. I like discussion because it means that you can have a good conversation with your students, either one-to-one, or students can discuss topics between themselves. There's also question and answer, again a good one, because question and answer can tease information out of them. You can also use it to question them in different ways. You can use targeted questions. You could use questions based on ability. You could get them to question you, which I really like doing. Also, there is demonstration. Good one, demonstration, where you give a demonstration of something, knitting or cookery, or perhaps drama, where you give a rendition of Shakespeare or something. There's also games and quizzes. Love games and quizzes. And I think students like those too. Then we've got videos. Videos, I love to use videos in my teaching, and also not only my own, but I also use them from YouTube as well, because sometimes it explains a topic clearly and better than we can, and perhaps it's got all the background with it, the props and all the rest of it that actually clearly show what you mean. Others are project work. I love using project work as well, because project work is good for classes where people are working on their own stuff. So for example, I was at a pottery class recently, not very good at it, but and I was working on a project that I really wanted to work on, and other people were creating other things that they wanted to work on. So we were all doing a project. Cartoons, that's another one. Unusual perhaps, cartoons. But I like using cartoons because I get students to actually draw out a cartoon of a description of some description. A description of some description. You see what I mean? It might be to tell a story, or it might be a way of giving feedback. But what they do is I give them out a big sheet of flip chart paper and some pens and say, okay, draw a cartoon now and explain to me what you mean in each of the shots. Quite popular, that one. Whiteboards, like using whiteboards as well, but not only just for me to write on and use, but I also like to get my students to use them as well. So I like to perhaps in a class where you're using computers, to actually get them to show what they've been working on their computer and link it up to the whiteboard and get them to come and explain what they're doing. Of course, with all teaching methods, and especially that one, you have to make sure that the students are comfortable with actually doing that. Tutorials is another one. I use tutorials especially on longer courses, and I work it in a variety of different ways, but one way that you could do it is to say to the students, right, could you turn up at 8:20, and at 8:20 we're going to go through X, Y or Z. And then the next student turns up at 8:30, or maybe you have 15 minutes with each student rather than 10. So you get them to come in at certain times. Or other times, perhaps they're working on a project and you take them to one side and spend 10 minutes giving them your full attention about whatever the topic. So those are 10 methods of using different teaching methods. So we're going to go into a bit more depth now into 4 others. I've chosen lecture. I've also chosen videos because I like videos. I've also chosen games and quizzes and demonstration. So what I want to do is talk to you first of all about lecture. Lecturing is a good way of getting information across to your students. But the problem with it is that people go on far too long with it. And imagine having a whole 2 hours being lectured at. I mean, some people do like that if they are that way inclined in terms of their learning style. Whether you believe in learning styles or not, if somebody likes to listen, this is a cracking way of teaching them. But those type of learners are few and far between. So most students like a bit of visual and like some activity going on. The way I think to lecture and to lecture successfully is to have something else going on in the class at the same time. And by that, I mean, if you're lecturing about something, say you're doing geography and you're lecturing about volcanoes, actually pass around some physical pieces of volcanic ash and give them to the students to look at while you're actually talking about it, because it gives them something else to look at, to feel, to touch, using their other senses. I know of a creative writing class that actually during the class, the teacher handed out some little pots and got the students to actually smell what was in the pots. So there was like grass was in one, freshly cut grass. There was talcum powder in one, all different things, perhaps a spice, cumin or curry powder or whatever it might be. So that while she was describing what she wanted them to do, they could actually smell these different pots. I think it's a great way to do lecturing. Have a board or something up behind them, like the whiteboard, a PowerPoint, and I don't mean death by PowerPoint, but something for students to actually be looking at, be touching, so that it makes lecturing more interesting. The other thing with lecturing is that it is very what we call teacher-centred. Teacher-centred means it's all about the teacher handing out the knowledge. And again, whilst some people love it, most students don't. They get bored. They have to just sit there passively waiting for or trying to take in the information. We're going to now look at 3 different what we call student-centred teaching approaches. Method. Student-centred means that it's based around the student. The students are doing the activities. There should be great rapport between you and the students, and also the students and their peers, so that it might be a bit noisy at times or whatever, but it's a small price to pay, and you as a teacher have obviously got to manage it well. But students, I think, on the whole, get much more out of that type of teaching method. So let's start with demonstrations. So if you're in a class, say let's use cookery, you're going to demonstrate how to chop vegetables in the correct way, or chop up an onion so it comes out into those little tiny cubes. You will have the students, or you'll need to have the students all round you, because one of the most important things about a demonstration is that the students are there, can hear what you're saying, they can also see what you're doing, and that you talk in a clear manner and a knowledgeable manner so that they can take in everything. I tend to demonstrate probably maximum 10 minutes at a time and then get the students to go and do what it is that I've demonstrated. But during the time when I'm demonstrating, I like to ask them to ask me questions. So if they don't understand what I'm doing or what I'm saying, that they ask me questions, or if they're thinking of something outside the box that I haven't brought up, that they actually ask you those questions about it. I think it's a really good way of getting the message or your approach across as to what you want them to do. There's also, within demonstration, I like to get the students to demonstrate as well. So it might be that they demonstrate to me exactly, and I observe that they demonstrate to me exactly what they've learned as I'm going around touring the class. Or if somebody's student's done something really well, I like to say to them, I always ask them first, would you mind sharing that with the rest of the class, what you've done and how you did it? Because there's no better way to learn than to have to teach somebody else something. But also sometimes it gives somebody such a boost that you actually think, do you know what? She thinks I've done it really, really well. And this praise can actually really motivate them. So demonstration is a really good way of getting your message across and is an excellent approach to learning. Another one, as I said to you earlier, I really like are games and quizzes. What I tend to do is put people in pairs or in teams. Sometimes they do it on their own. And then I'll give them perhaps a questionnaire, which is multiple choice, or I will say, okay, I'll ask the question, be a quiz master, or sometimes I get the students to be a quiz master if they like doing that kind of thing. And asking questions and getting the students to give us the right answers and perhaps have a discussion about why they're right or they're wrong. Sometimes I have a little prize for them. Sometimes it's, I don't know, some sweets or, a Mars bar or something like that. But what I would say to you on that note is if you are going to give out prizes and they are something to eat, make sure that everybody can eat them. There's no allergies or somebody isn't diabetic and so on. And if they are, or you know that they are, then try and get them something that isn't chocolate or something that they can actually. So that's games and quizzes. One other thing about the games and quizzes, I like them to get to actually play games. So sometimes I'll set out a board game and I'll change it a bit so that it's relevant to the teaching. But I get them to actually sit down and play a game, and they love doing that as well. Okay, the last one that I wanted to talk to you about today was videos. I like using videos and YouTube clips, but they have to be relevant. There's no point in just showing anything willy-nilly, as it were. And also, don't go on for too long with it, because again, they get fidgety if they're not interested or it's a bit boring or whatever, and hopefully they won't be. But I try not to do more than a 10-minute video. But what I always do is if I'm going to show a video, I check it first, go through it, make sure that it's relevant to what you're teaching, make sure there isn't any swearing in it or any inappropriate behaviour, that nobody would be offended by it. The next thing to do, or what I always do, is to ask them questions about what's coming up in the video, things that they need to look out for. So I'll say something along the lines of, what I want to give you to give me at the end of this, or what I'm going to be questioning you on, is the structure of that video, or give me 3 ways that somebody did that, or want you to come up with some really good style ideas from what I've discussed. So it gives them something to look for, because otherwise they'll just sit there and watch the video and sometimes can be quite passive at looking at. And you don't want that. You want them to actually get something out of it, because there's no point in showing a video if they're not going to get anything out of it. So I hope that this has been interesting, and I hope that it has given you some ideas and some ways of using teaching approaches or teaching methods, and that you understand what a teaching method is, that it is an approach, or lots of approaches hopefully, that you use in your classes to get your message across. And then the 4 that I used lastly were lecture, demonstration, videos and quizzes and games.